Hi everyone and welcome to the coverage for the next round from the Candidates Tournament 2011. Once more there was only one win and 3 draws, so I thought we'd take a look at the win. It featured in the game Mamedyarov Gelfand, which was a Sicilian, with Mamedyarov opening with e4, after which came the book line c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and a6. The infamous Najdorf variation, a weapon of many top grandmasters. Mamedyarov continued with bishop c4, which is the Fischer-Sozin attack, which generally leads to sharp and tactical play. We're still in the book lines though, and that's what the game followed, with e6, just blunting the bishop, bishop b3, and b5, threatening b4 and knight takes e4, which Mamedyarov was unafraid of, as here he castled. And with white castling short, the game loses some of the typical Sicilian aggression that occurs with opposite sides castling, which is more common. Gelfand continued with bishop e7, wisely not going after the e-pawn with b4, and whites are often prepared to sacrifice it in Sicilian setups for a lead in development and chances for attack. Nevertheless, Mamedyarov defended it now with queen f3, which is threatening e5, attacking the knight and the rook on a8 simultaneously, which Gelfand dealt with by playing queen c7, which enables bishop b7 in the event of e5. Next came queen g3, again offering the e-pawn, but Gelfand quite rightly castled. If instead b4, now comes knight ce2, and if knight takes e4, queen takes g7, which wins back the material. And after bishop f6, it's an equal position for now, but it's going to be hard for black to find a safe spot for his king. So castles, and now bishop h6, threatening mate on g7, and pretty much forcing the passive response, knight e8. But Gelfand is happy to defend and provoke weaknesses in the white camp. Knight e8 is a Petrosian-esque move. Indeed, this entire game could have been played by the old world champion, as you'll see when it progresses. Mamedyarov continued with the rook ad1, which gets another piece into the fray and takes aim at black's d6 pawn, which is his most obvious weakness, although it's well defended for the moment, and this d-file is almost always strong for white in the Sicilian. Gelfand continued development with bishop d7, and Mamedyarov struck out with f4, which is both aggressive and weakening, as it creates 2 holes in the white position at e4 and e3, as well as making the e4 pawn more difficult to defend. Provoking this is probably exactly the kind of thing Gelfand was hoping for. So knight c6, challenging the well-posted white knight. And Mamedyarov pushed on with f5, which gains space and adds more pressure onto the black position. Gelfand relieved it a little by exchanging on d4 here, which opens up the c-file for queen activity. And now rook takes d4 and king h8, which is the first new move of the game, which solves the pin on the g-file and poses some questions to the bishop at h6. However, this is not the best move in the position, although it's a solid one. Better was bishop f6 followed up with b4, or simply b4 immediately. So king h8, and now bishop e3, which controls this sensitive diagonal because the f-pawn has moved, and saves the bishop from the pawn. But this was a suboptimal move, and now we have an objectively equal position. It was amazing to see this retreat from Mamedyarov, who's a brilliant attacker. The GMs watching were surprised that he didn't spot f6 instead, which keeps the pressure going. Best play goes bishop takes f6. If instead g takes h6, white is much better after f takes e7, rook g8, and queen e3, threatening rook takes f7, and queen takes h6, with black's king sweating, and an obvious and big plus for white positionally for the rest of the game. So after bishop takes f6, there's rook takes f6, where there's no g takes f6, or the rook at f8 is falling, and there's no knight takes f6 because of the mate threat. So g takes h6, and now rook takes h6, with material equality but a far superior position again for white. But anyway, Mamedyarov missed that and played bishop e3. And next we had knight f6, because there's no longer any threat on g7, and from here black is doing well and can hope to defend fairly easily and exploit the early white advance. The e-pawn can now be targeted safely as development is fairly equal, and black's problems are pretty much over. He can follow up with bishop c6, rook c8, and gain good activity. Mamedyarov still had some attacking ideas to try, however, and continued with queen h3, which adds pressure to e6 and prompted Gelfand to push forward in the center with d5, which undermines the support of the f-pawn and cracks open the center while white's pieces aren't ideally coordinated. e5 was also possible, but despite coming with tempo, it's badly weakening, and the d5 advance, which black always wants to play in the Sicilian, will be made very difficult to achieve. Excuse me. Mamedyarov now decided on sacking his e-pawn to keep the center relatively closed and aim for kingside piece activity with e5, which allows his rook to swing over to the king side. Fritz prefers instead e takes d5, believing white to be better after e takes f5 and king h1 with a small edge. However, the d-pawn is going to be hard to defend, and this opening of the game allows black greater activity. What's more, potential endgames are made very tricky for white, who would be facing a 4-2 pawn majority on the king side. So e5, anyway, is what Mamedyarov played. So queen takes e5, and Gelfand's provocation results in Mamedyarov sacking a pawn, which is a good result so far. Now he just has to hope that he can defend okay. Defending is one of Gelfand's great strengths, but attacking is one of Mamedyarov's, so it makes for an interesting battle, and one Mamedyarov was clearly willing to give up a pawn to enter into. Naturally, the engines don't like this idea, but they're shamelessly materialistic. So rook h4, and now rook fc8. And most analysts agree that moving the other rook to c8, threatening to sack the exchange in order to win a second pawn with the queen on c3, was preferable. And it's important to note too that e takes f5 is no good because of bishop d4, where if the queen moves, then bishop takes f6 is coming, followed by rook takes h7 and a force mate. So f4, discovering an attack on the white queen is forced, but after bishop takes e5, bishop takes h3, rook takes h3, white is winning easily with an extra piece. So rook fc8 and now king h1, and for a second time Mamedyarov misses the opportunity to gain an advantage in the position. He may have been worried about queen takes e3, followed up with bishop c5, resulting in good endgame chances for white. But at this stage he had to try bishop g5, which creates some crazy complications that generally seem to favor white. The threat, of course, is bishop takes f6, followed up with rook takes h7. And the line given by Stockfish goes h6, f takes e6, bishop takes e6, rook takes h6 check. A nice shot, because after g takes h6, queen takes h6. It's going to win back some material on f6 after king g8. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, rook takes f6, and white has a pawn for the exchange and greater activity, but it's not totally clear how he can continue his attack. Perhaps this is why Mamedyarov avoided this line. But after his move, king h1, Gelfand was now able to play rook takes c3, which is a fantastic continuation and easily the best move. After b takes c3, he wins a second pawn for the exchange with queen takes c3, and this move achieves several things. White's b3 bishop is now rendered useless, and black threatens a4 and a5, trapping it, as white is unable to move his a-pawn without losing it. As well as that, the e3 bishop is pinned, because if it moves there'll be a queen trade and a good endgame for black with 2 extra pawns, a stronger center, and little rook activity for the white rooks, and again the inactive b3 bishop. And Mamedyarov has to try something, and he went for rook d4, aiming to save the bishop after a5 with the rook d3. Playing instead a4 adds to black's advantage, as the c-pawn is falling. After b takes a4, bishop takes a4, bishop takes a4, rook takes a4, and queen takes c2, but even stronger in this position is e5. So rook d3, queen c6, and now c3, allowing the bishop to move to c2 after a4. So bishop c2. But this loss of time results in the ability for black to be able to advance in the center, and after attacking aggressively, Mamedyarov is forced to retreat, and black is left with a big positional advantage after e5, with a great pawn center, 2 pawns for the exchange, and all the play in the position. So bishop g5 from Mamedyarov, and finally this move is playable after breaking the pin on, so there's no queen exchange. But it's come, as I said, at the cost of time, and Gelfand now has b4, exploiting the pin on the c pawn because the bishop will be attacked by the queen. And Mamedyarov could have played bishop d1 to avoid this, but this would have worsened his already weak piece coordination. From here on we will see a great demonstration of the power of a strong center. Mamedyarov played queen h4, aiming again for an unsubtle attack with rook h3 coming next. Better was bishop takes f6, and rook fd1, aiming at the d pawn. But here black can play d4, and after c takes d4, e takes d4 with an ongoing advantage. These passed pawns are going to be very hard to deal with. Playing instead queen takes c2 would lose to d takes e5, bishop b5, and rook 3 d2, and pieces dropping, and white should win quite easily. So queen h4 from Mamedyarov, and b takes c3, and now with 3 pawns for the exchange and a dominating pawn roller in the center, black is winning. After rook h3 comes the very calm king g8, which is going to allow the king to escape after bishop takes f6, queen takes h7, simply king f8 is fine, and although it would make the black king more exposed, it would only add to black's advantage. Mamedyarov saw this and played rook e1. We can have a quick look at bishop takes f6, queen takes h7, king f8, and remarkably the king is fine even after queen h8 check, king e7. And now how does white get any more play, and more to the point, how does he deal with these central pawns? So rook e1, now e4. There's no need to delay the advancing of the pawns, and once more white's light squared bishop is blunted, and Mamedyarov went for broke now with g4, which bolsters his f5 pawn, which was attacked by the bishop, and this move probably does more damage to the white king's safety than the black ones. And here Gelfand got his king a little further from danger with king f8, because rook g1 may have been threatened at some point. So bishop e3, which prepares g4, and queen takes h7. Playing instead bishop takes f6 again is fairly pointless. Despite winning a pawn back, black is still much better. After bishop takes f6, queen takes h7, and simply king e7, and he's completely solid. So bishop e3, and now queen c4, which supports the advance of the central pawns and also takes aim at a2. So g5, aiming to take on h7. So Gelfand played the correct response, bishop takes f5, and Mamedyarov is willing to give back an exchange in order to try and drum up some counterplay, but his position is lost and he could reasonably resign at this point. Gelfand has correctly assessed his position to still be completely winning after his knight falls with g takes f6 and bishop takes f6. And now there's no queen takes h7 because the bishop is defending it and the queen is attacked, so Mamedyarov moved it to h5, and as I said, he's willing to give up the exchange to get counterplay. However, Gelfand had other ideas and kept his position totally solid and winning with the unexpected bishop g6, and now his king is totally safe and there'll be no kingside play from Mamedyarov, and the bishops are perfectly placed to support the advance of the center pawns, which will now win the game. And after the exchanges, we're left with an incredibly rare position. Black is a rook down, but he has 5 pawns in return for it, and as a result, a winning position. It's reminiscent of some famous games from the past, notably Fischer against Spassky, game 13 of the 1972 World Championships, and the play of this game has been similar in many respects to some of Tiger and Petrosian's famous exchange sacrifice strategies. It was really a very impressive game from Gelfand. After queen g4, because the queen has to move, it's attacked, Black now has 6 pawns for the rook, with queen takes a2, and all that remains is to advance the pawn center and win. White will be forced to sacrifice at least 1 piece, perhaps even 2, but there's no way he can stop all 5 passed pawns. Mamedyarov went for bishop b1, so just getting a tempo on the queens. So queen c4 again is going to support the central advance. And now queen g2 prevents d4 for the moment, so Gelfand advanced his a pawn instead with a3. Now came bishop a2 again, knocking the queen, but simply queen c6 once more prepares the advancing of these pawns. And Mamedyarov has no counterplay whatsoever. He tried rook g3, but after rook b8 with rook b2 coming next, he resigned, saying that there was no way to save the position. So it was a fantastic game from the positional genius Boris Gelfand, who along with Gatakamsky now has better chances than anyone else of securing a place in the second round tomorrow. Their opponents, Topalov and Mamedyarov respectively, will have to win tomorrow or face elimination. As always, I'll be watching on Chess Bomb, so I hope to see you there. Thanks very much.